The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus said, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at the right hand, and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then he will say to those at his left hand, you that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison? Excuse me. And did not take care of you? And he will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
O Adonai, Holy Trinity, in your omnipotence we find courage, in your omniscience we find wisdom, in your omnipresence we will never be alone. Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. What you do to the least of these, you do to me. Yesterday afternoon, I really didn't want to do a memorial service. It was a Saturday, Thanksgiving weekend. I wanted to stay home, watch college football, and enjoy myself. And yet it was a memorial service remembering a young woman who died a year ago. And the main reason wasn't college football, because I didn't even have a TV at home. But the real thing that I was struggling with is that I didn't want to remember. I didn't want to remember a death of a young autistic woman, because I didn't want to think about my own son who has autism and the fact that he could be taken at any given moment. I didn't want to let that in. I didn't want to do that, and yet members of the parish, they asked, and with the help of a few of my friends, we were able to make that happen. You see, the reality of it is, and this is what we struggle with today, is that I didn't want to make room for the reality of that loss. Didn't want to think about that loss that some of you have endured. And so there is this great struggle within me to deny that reality. And that's what we do. We struggle against every Christ the King Sunday. Is that we recognize that the lordship of Jesus Christ does not come from our creation, but it is rather something that is given to us as a gift. That Jesus is Lord whether we like it or not. King whether we have coronated him, whether we have been part of his coronation or not. Which means that we will be part of that great mass of people who will come before him, where every knee will bow and every tongue will confess and say that he is Lord. No matter what has happened to us, no matter what we have done, we will come before the very throne of God. And Jesus will speak to us as he spoke to those who are on his right and those who are on his left, the sheep and the goats. And so today we're going to look at the lordship of Christ. We're going to look at training in the very justice of God. And finally, we are going to look at the restoration that is coming for us all, that which we have been longing for since our birth. In the first century, when the Christian church were saying Jesus is Lord, it was a statement against Caesar. Caesar was the one ruler over all of the Roman Empire in Jesus' time and in the time of the apostles and the time of the early church. And so when the church began to recognize in the ascension of Jesus Christ that Christ was made Lord over all of the universe, that all of creation was there because of him and everyone would bow to him, they said Jesus is Lord, and secretly they were saying Caesar is not. Caesar was the only one that you had to light a candle to in every temple, no matter who the god was. And Jews and Christians together said, we aren't doing that. Because we believe in a God that is above Caesar, that might have allowed Caesar and given Caesar the power that he has now, but there is a Lord that he will have to reckon to too. And it's why we light the Paschal candle over and over again. The candle, not for Caesar, but for Jesus. Now, flash forward 2,000 years, and many of us are going to want to say, okay, Jesus is Lord, Donald Trump is not. Jesus is Lord. You know, a year ago or 2 years ago, Barack Obama is not. Depending on our political proclivities, right? I mean, whatever it is that we struggle with. But the truth is, in our situation, we have created a society where we are responsible for everything that we get. We empower all of the leaders that lead us. And at the end of the day, what we have to say when we say Jesus is Lord on days like today and every other Sunday is Jesus is Lord and I am not. So before we understand the sheep and the goats, before we understand this entire passage, we have to understand the day that we have come into, which is that this is the day when we recognize that all of our freedom, all of the gifts that God has given us, all of the blessings that have been bestowed upon us, even all of the hurts that have happened to us sometimes, that does not negate the lordship of Christ. And that everything for which we are responsible, we bring before God. Jesus is Lord and I am not. And so when we look at this passage through those lenses, we recognize that Jesus is not marking out the good from the bad, but it is marking out those who have sought him and have been trained to live justly in the world that he has created, and those who have decided to live in an isolated manner in this world. There's YouTube videos, and they fly up on Facebook every Thanksgiving. Every time Black Friday comes around and everybody's freaking out and running into the store and mauling over people for that last TV and doing crazy things, right? Then someone, self-righteously I would say, put up something of, we went to 20 homeless people and 20 normal people. And we asked the normal people for a bite of their sandwich, and none of them said that they would do it. And then they go around showing these people, saying, hey, could I have half your sandwich? Could I have this? Could I have that? And then you go to the homeless people who have had pizza or something there, and they say, hey, can I have some of your pizza? And the homeless will give it to them, right? But the normal people will not, right? And then there's this self-righteous kind of game that we play, and we show how righteous those who are impoverished are in comparison to all of us, and we try and make everybody guilty and all of those things, right? That's what we do, to make ourselves feel better about the fact that we're mauling people over at Walmart and destroying things, right? That's what we do. But the reality is the reason why those people who are struggling have the ability to hand someone a piece of pizza or half of their sandwich or something like that who is in need is not because they're better than us. It's not because there is some sort of sanctified work which God has created before time began and made this person better than someone like me or someone like all of us. The reality is they've just been trained to live that way. They have been trained to care for one another because they have had to be cared for. They've recognized the importance of community because they wouldn't survive without it. And that's the one thing that Jesus is trying to get us to see. It's not just that I am there, and what you do to the least of these you do to me, but I'm the one who brought all of these people to you. And I am training them in how to create a just world when the world that you live by will fall apart. And you will be in need of someone's grace just like they are in need of your grace. Because that's the world that I have created. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. Because it's love that binds us together. Nothing else. And those of you who want to live isolated from one another, and I'm not talking about anyone in this room besides myself. Right? The same guy who's playing on his phone so as to let the homeless guy walk by him when he's in the collar. Remember that story I told? He knocks on the window thinking he wants money because I don't have any money in my glove compartment like I usually have. Right? And he says, will you just pray for me? Remember that story I told? Right? And I'm trying to hide from it. That's me. I just want to live alone in my car and just get from point A to point B without anybody interrupting that. And the great God that we have says that's not good enough. I will interrupt your life, and your lives. And you will find me in the places where you don't recognize me. Not because I want you to feel guilty, but because I want you to recognize that I'm never going to leave you or forsake you. I'm never going to let you live as though you could be by yourself for the rest of your life. That loneliness is not the end. You will not be lost in space. But I am here with you. And in that love, I am restoring all things to myself. You guys got scared when it said eternal damnation and all that stuff, right? No? Yeah? Some of you should have. All right. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But the reality is that's not a damnation that God has created for us before the beginning of the world, and he's trying to measure us and saying, okay, you go in the damnation pile, you go into the good pile, right? God's not doing that. There isn't a test that we have to pass before we get into heaven. God is saying the life that you have been living now will be reflected in the life that you will live for all eternity. And you've got to train yourself for heaven. And the way in which you do that is by visiting those in prison. By caring for those who are sick. By clothing the naked. Right? All of those things that Jesus is talking about today is training ground for the life that we will live for all eternity. The life with God and with each other. Where we will be naked and unashamed. Where our riches will pour in from the love that we have from one another. Where our healing will be seen from the fact that we have opened ourselves up to one another and they have opened themselves up to us. And on it goes. That's what restoration looks like. That's what Jesus' healing was supposed to get us to see over and over again. And that's the life that we can live now. And I see it in all of you. That seed has been planted in you at some point in your life. And it's growing. And sometimes, like me, we want to stop that growth because It interrupts the life that we have lived. When I was living at General Theological Seminary in New York City, Alita was working and putting me through school. It was glorious. I mean, like, that's the life, guys. That's the life. And she did that she did that by working as a hematology-oncology nurse at New York Presbyterian's Children's Hospital. She was working with kids with cancer. And over again, she saw kids who were dying and dying. And I might have told this story before, but I got invited to Make-A-Wish dinner for one of these kids. The Make-A-Wish Foundation is one of the greatest foundations that's out there, right? They take these kids and they say, whatever you want, you can have, basically. And it's not, they don't ever ask for a car or, pay off my dad's mortgage or something like that. But they ask for things like, can I go to Disneyland or Disney World or something like that, right? And this kid couldn't do that. So they brought, Disney World to him, and he went to this great restaurant up in Washington Heights, and they had all their family there, and the kid was there, and it was glorious, and all of the staff from the hospital who had been working with him was there, and Alita invited me, and I got to go. Now, I had just finished a rotation as a CPE resident in 2003 and 2004 before I went to seminary, and I worked with vets who were dying, and over and over again I did something like 60 memorial services for these vets who were dying, and I saw this kid who had about 6 months to live. And I realized I hadn't seen anything, and this is something that my wife was able to bring care to, live with, and brings herself home and still be normal and not depressed all the time and all of those things. And I had no idea how she could do that. Because I left that night wondering where God was. Wondering how this could happen. Wondering, where is it, God, in your great and divine plan that allows for something like this to happen? And it's because God had planted a seed in me when I, long ago, the year before, when I was a VA chaplain. And it was growing, and God was saying, I'm inviting you into this space where you could meet me, this vulnerable little boy, and with the amazing work that your wife and all these people were doing, and all I could see was the darkness and the death that was coming, and how it's not supposed to be that way. And what I'm calling us to see today is the God who says, just because it's not supposed to be that way doesn't mean that I'm not there. The God who says, I am with you in whatever circumstances you have, whatever you are enduring, and I am with others, and you can meet me by sharing your story with them and hearing their story as well. Because that's the reality that we've been living into and neglecting our whole lives. God is with us. God is with us and has given us so many gifts. And our job is to receive them, accept them, find Him in the midst of them, and to find a way to praise Him.